Hello, friends. It's your main man, Mr. Jenkins, for week 3 of the Ask an Adult podcast, where you have left in my Twitter feed or in the comments below questions that I will answer. Now, the question for today is, what do you do about the crippling existential dread that you have before you go to sleep and after you wake up? Now, this question might be a joke, but I have the assumption that some of you guys have some anxiety. Some of you guys may have some dread. Dread is like true fear. And we'll talk about existentialism for a minute. But what we're really going to talk about is about anxiety. And for some of you guys, it flares up at night. For some of you guys, it flares up in the morning. For some of you guys, it flares up when you do drugs. For some of you guys, it flares up when you're around people that you haven't been around for a while, when you're in social situations. So today, the real theme of today is about anxiety. And I think it's Diego who asked this question, but I'm not sure. I think it's Diego that asked this question, but I'm not sure. So the advice that I have, and I'm just a regular adult, the advice that I have for you guys this week is about anxiety. And some of you guys have a feeling of anxiety before you go to sleep, or if you wake up, when you wake up in the morning. So how do you deal with anxiety? Now, some of you guys in here have never dealt with anxiety in your lives. You've never experienced anxiety before. And there's some anxiety that's positive. Anxiety or nervousness that's positive. It's essentially nervousness. It's positive because you're in a situation where you need to perform better, or that anxiety before a sports match, anxiety before performing on stage, anxiety before a test. A small amount of nervousness can be very helpful because it heightens your senses, it makes you more aware. A little bit of anxiety before your driver's test, when you're taking your test for your driver's license, is probably good. Why? It makes you hyper aware of the cars around you. You know, as long as you keep it under wraps, that it's not negatively affecting your performance, then it can be positive. A high level of, or a accelerated level of adrenaline can be a positive thing. But when people usually talk about anxiety or nervousness, they talk about it as something that's negative. And the true definition of anxiety, or having an anxiety attack, or having a panic attack, or having dread, is when you have the feeling of intense nervousness and your heart starts to race and you have tunnel vision, and it's as if you were just in a car accident, or you're about to go on stage, but actually there is no reason for you to feel that way at all. You feel sick to your stomach, you have a shortness of breath. For some people, it feels like they're having a heart attack. This is like true panic. Those feelings can come out of nowhere, and they can come right before you go to sleep. For some people, they can come just out of nowhere. In fact, me talking about it right now could be triggering for some of you. So how do we deal with that? The feeling of terror when there is no stimuli for terror. That's the definition. That's the true definition of anxiety. That's a complicated thing to deal with, but here's what I do know. The best way to tackle anxiety is not to fight against it, but to move with it. So if you are feeling as if your heart is starting to race, and you have this feeling of dread, and your body feels heavy, and your breathing feels shallow, try to tighten up those feelings. Actually, try to make it worse. Say in your brain, I just want this to actually get worse. Really commit to it getting worse. And in the process of getting worse, it will get better. Because the harder you fight against that feeling of anxiety or of panic, the more it stays. It's kind of like a cycle. But when you let it happen, or you even try to amplify it a little bit, that's when it's going to die down. So if I were to give you a graph, it would look like this, where your anxiety level peaks, and the more you fight against it, the higher it stays up. Or if you just acknowledge it, so the higher it stays up. If you just acknowledge it and you say, oh, I'm having this feeling of anxiety right now, I know from the past it's going to pass, that this too shall pass. It will start to dissipate. Kind of like a brain freeze, or like having a headache, something like that. You know after a certain amount of time it will go away. Okay. Now, if you're experiencing this chronically, you have anxiety all the time, you have this feeling of dread all the time, I would recommend talking to a doctor, or more specifically, a psychiatrist, somebody, or a psychologist. more specifically a psychiatrist. You probably need some meds if you're having the feeling of anxiety all the time. Okay. Existential dread. Existentialism, for those of you guys who don't know, it means it's the question of why do we exist, or what is our purpose here on the earth. The existentialists essentially have said that we've been put here as kind of like a joke, that we're here only for a moment and then we die. So why are there stars in the sky? Why do we exist? Why is the earth floating around the sun? If you start having those thoughts, those really big thoughts about the smallness of your life, about how everyone has a whole universe of experiences in their brain, and you are just one of billions of ants that are sitting on a blue ball floating around. For some of you guys, that's really powerful in a positive way. It's like, oh, my life, I've always thought it meant so much, and now I have this weight off my shoulders because I know I'm just part of this bigger collective. For some of you guys, it can be really positive, but for many of you, that idea that existence might not matter that much in the grand scheme of things is a pretty terrifying idea. And so this is the idea of existential dread. What if my life doesn't matter? If I no longer existed, who would care? Right? These are really dark, when you frame them that way, they're really dark ideas. And so if you're having those kind of thoughts, those kind of ruminations, before you go to sleep, or when you're waking up in the morning, just accept them for how they are. You don't have to give them any weight. You can just go, oh, that's that thought that I'm having again. Maybe I should look at something on my phone, or maybe I should listen to music, or maybe I should read a book. Do something constructive. Because not all thoughts that we have are important. They're not. Sometimes you have dumb thoughts. Sometimes you have thoughts that are meaningless. And to give all your thoughts meaning is a trick that your mind plays on you. A negative trick. Not the trick. A negative trick. I hope that answered your question. This is kind of a short one about anxiety and existential dread. Oh, something else, a bonus. If you experience anxiety regularly, where you feel anxious, like nervous, but not with any stimuli, know that anxiety and depression are two sides to the same coin. So if you are anxious all the time, there will also be a time where you're depressed. And if you're depressed sometimes, just know that there will be times where you are anxious. That essentially those are the same thing, but they're manifested in two different ways. The chemical in your brain is the same. The chemical in your brain is the same. So what does that mean? It means that if you know people who experience intense anxiety, then they have also experienced some form of depression. And if you know people who have experienced chronic depression, then they've also experienced some form of anxiety. And that is where a psychologist or a psychiatrist can get involved. Because if you get one, you start getting the other. If you know how to stop the depression, then you know how to stop the anxiety. And for those of you guys who are self-medicating with alcohol, marijuana, any other drugs, promethazine, just know that if you're trying to make your depression better and you're smoking pot or you're drinking alcohol and then you're having anxiety and you're trying to make your anxiety better by doing the drugs might be the thing that are fueling the anxiety and the depression, because you can't have one without the other. So if you're medicating for one and then you have the side effect of the other, just know that the drugs or the alcohol could be contributing, because both marijuana and alcohol are depressants. So if they're making you depressed themselves, then they're also the thing that are causing you anxiety. All right. Hope you guys are good. I miss you all. I hope you all make good choices. I think I might be missing my exit. No. Dude, I don't know. Maybe? I'm real tired. If you made it this far, gold star. Make good choices. See you next week.